We're almost there. I know that you were all thinking two things. You're thinking, I hope this guy makes it snappy. It has been a long day, although a brilliant day. And you're probably also thinking, I know who Terry Kawaja, Brian O'Kelly, and Ed Begley Jr. are, but who is this English dude who's just got up on stage? So my name is Guy Jones. I am the co-founder of a business called the GoodNet. We have tools and products that help brands plan, optimize, and measure their digital media against a combination of ESG goals, but also campaign performance goals. And that's kind of handy, because what I'm going to talk about today is largely to do with that. So I'm going to be talking about snappy title, but essentially for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk to you about how brands can build media strategies that support their broader corporate ESG objectives, but also deliver value back to the bottom line. So why am I going to talk about this? Well, because every ad dollar matters. Every ad dollar should be measured for the impact that it's having on a brand's bottom line. It should be measured for the impact that it's having on their financial metrics. But I believe that it should also be measured for the impact that it has on their non-financial metrics. What's the impact of spending that dollar on the environment? But also, what's the impact of that dollar in terms of the content that it funds and the influence that has on the behavior of hundreds of millions of people all around the world? What's its impact in terms of the business that it supports, that receive ultimately that money, and how do they conduct themselves? Fundamentally, if a brand has a whole different range of social and environmental goals, do the millions and millions of dollars that they spend on media and marketing contribute to and support those goals, or actually do they work in opposition to them sometimes? And fundamentally, how do they even know? How do they measure that in any kind of robust way? So I think anyone who's been out and about in market talking about this subject over the last sort of few years will at some stage have heard this. And it was fantastic on the last panel to hear those agency folks saying, actually, no, our brands really do care, and I also believe that. But this is definitely an objection that comes up. And there's kind of an honesty moment here as well, which is in the latest IAB State of Readiness survey, only about 1 in 5 companies on our industry say we are making substantial progress in the area of sustainability. But what's probably helpful is some of the verbatim stuff. The thing that's holding us back is what's been talked about a lot today. It's this perception that sustainability, doing sustainability, and campaign performance are somehow in opposition to each other. And we've heard lots of examples from previous sessions and previous panels of people saying that's not true. But that perception absolutely exists. There are people who believe that factoring sustainability or more sustainable practices into their marketing makes it harder for them to deliver their core set of KPIs. And that's actually quite interesting if you just take your head out of media and out of marketing and you start to think about the brands that we all work with or work for more broadly. So Frank actually this morning mentioned this same survey from BDO talking to CFOs of big businesses. And it's really interesting what they say. They say that they're planning to maintain or increase their investments in ESG and sustainability. They say that they're expecting personally, their own personal involvement in these areas to increase over the next coming years. And they're also saying that they expect their businesses to continue to grow. So you have CFOs saying, this stuff is important, it matters to us, it deserves our time and attention, and it's not an inhibitor of growth, it's actually a really important part of brands achieving the things that they're setting out to do. But on the other hand, excuse me, on the other hand, you've still got people in our industry who disagree with that premise, who think actually the two things are fundamentally in opposition. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. You know, we've spoken a lot today about terminology, and there is so much noise. You know, even the term ESG, let alone things like DE&I, are becoming so loaded. We are seeing lots and lots of brands reconfiguring their objectives in this area, you know, perhaps talking about supporting SMEs instead of supporting more diverse groups, for example. We're seeing some brands actually sort of retrench quite considerably, but we're also seeing a lot of brands who are recommitting and saying, no, this is really, really important to us. We're not going to deviate from our strategy. Give me 1 second. That's unfortunate, isn't it? We're not going to deviate from our strategy. So with all of that noise swirling around, how do we know what to make of it? Well, actually, there is helpful data that we can look at. So this is really interesting research from Harvard Law School, and it's just at the end of last year, so it's fairly current. They looked at the ESG reports of half of the S&P 500 and did an awful lot of analysis on them. And they found that CEOs are taking more personal responsibility for ESG strategy than they ever have before. But one thing that jumped out to me is just the length of these reports is increasing. It's up by about 20% versus the last time this analysis was done. Now, the reports are getting longer. It could be that it's bigger font or just more images, but probably more likely it's that they are reporting in more detail on what they're doing, and they are reporting in more aspects of their business, which brings us back to marketing. Because marketing, as we all know, is an enormous area of investment. It's one of the largest cost centers that most large brands have. I think Gartner says it's equivalent to about 8% of company turnover goes on media and marketing. And yet it makes up a tiny, tiny fraction of what is being talked about in these reports. And when it is mentioned, it usually doesn't have very hard metrics to back up what's being said. So brands think that ESG is important, and they know that marketing and media is important. So how do we get to a situation, that KPMG are talking about here, where there's an incredibly strong alignment between ESG strategy and metrics and core business objectives? Or to put that a slightly different way, how do we replicate in media the really sophisticated approaches that already exist in these brands when they're talking about manufacturing or supply chain or logistics or a whole variety of other things? And coming back to it, how do we talk about performance? So Dentsu did analysis at the end of last year, talking to over 2,000 senior marketeers across the world, and they called out planning for a combination of performance and sustainability as their biggest challenge. I mean, I've vested interest in that being true, but that surprised even me. It's up there with, tackling the challenges and opportunities of AI. It's up there with things like data privacy. But the word challenge is really, really interesting, because challenge says two things. One, it says that they care about it. If you don't care about it, it's not a challenge. You just don't do it. You just go, well, that's not important to me. But it also says that it's difficult. So maybe what we're facing here is not my brand doesn't care about sustainability. It's my brand is still figuring out how to think about media within this world of ESG and sustainability. So how do we make it easier for them? Well, I think there are three sort of very clear things that we need to be thinking about. The first one is we need consistent metrics that can align marketing investment and spend with ESG strategy. Second, we need to continue to prove out the performance story. We've heard it lots of times today, but the numbers from that survey show that a lot of people don't believe it. And we need to be able to customize this stuff to specific brands. Brands have a whole range of different social and environmental goals. It's not as simple as just saying, this is about carbon reduction. That's incredibly important, but it's by no means the whole picture. So to summarize, I guess, that first sort of thought, every brand, in my view, needs an ESG media strategy. It's one that will align with their overall corporate ESG strategy, and it's one that will drive performance. So today is a lot about action, and it's about, well, what do we do next? So I just want to kind of finish by giving some practical examples of how this can look. So this is using Coke as an example. So everything on this slide is Coke's language from their sustainability reporting. And there's three things that I would focus on here. First of all, look at the breadths of the goals. There's stuff in there about good health and well-being. There's stuff in there about climate, obviously. There's stuff in there about equality. You might not be able to read it because it's very small. Apologies for that. But it's very, very broad. The second thing is it's all backed up with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we see this really consistently, that they are a framework that really is being used by brands to frame their strategies. And the third thing is, if you read that report, which, by the way, is a lot longer than 80 pages, there's almost no mention of media and marketing within there. And if it is, it's more to do with specific purpose-driven bits of communication. So how could we then go about converting that approach, what they're trying to achieve corporately, into a set of metrics that works in the world of media and marketing? Well, climate is probably one of the easiest ones, and as has been said today, a lot of progress is being made. If they're looking to reduce their carbon intensity and their overall carbon load, then they can do that by a range of things within their digital supply chain and the way that they execute advertising buys. But what about packaging? Really important to them. They talk about driving the circular economy. What on earth can marketing and media do to help drive the circular economy? Well, they can measure, baseline, and increase their investment in content which is inspiring and educating people to live more sustainably. There's no point making it really easy to recycle plastic bottles if no one wants to recycle plastic bottles. But to think of it a different way, what is it? I think on Terry's slide, something like 600 billion at the moment of digital ad spend every year. That's a hell of a war chest to go and fund content that's going to make the world a better place. And actually, it's a really practical way in which marketing and media can align with the goals of a brand like Coke. And look at the last one there, which is around people and communities. That's about the impact they have on the communities around them. They, again, can measure, baseline, and increase their investments in companies, in media owners that are doing the right thing, that treat their employees well, that have inclusive practices, that have their own net zero goals, that take data privacy seriously. The way that we do this is through our platform, which is GoodIQ, and I'm not going to go into it in any level of detail. Strangely, it's all done that. Odd. But essentially, we measure thousands and thousands of digital properties, whether they're websites, apps, channels, CTV channels, lots of different things. And we think that it's really important that you look holistically across a number of different areas. So we look at content. So to what extent are these digital properties, content supporting different sustainability goals? We look at consumption, so that is things like energy consumption, but also wastage and the efficacy of advertising campaigns, so minimizing wastage and maximizing efficacy. And we also look at the corporate, so how do the companies that own these websites, own these apps, how do they behave at a corporate level? And then fundamentally, we bring all of this back to ad performance. And I'm going to keep on talking about it, even though it's been talked about a lot today, because I think it's incredibly important. Because quite frankly, everything I've just said, if by pursuing strategies that allow you to do that, Coke sells less Coke, they're not going to do it. Altruism is not a strong enough motive for any of this stuff to work. It has to come from seeing results within your business. But the good news is the results are there. So we've been going for about 3 years as a business. GoodIQ has been in operation for about 2 of those, and we have measured billions and billions of ad impressions across hundreds and hundreds of brands in pretty much every country in the world so far. So we're in a really sort of fortunate position to be able to look into that data and see patterns and to see trends. And what we see is incredibly consistently that what we would describe as higher scoring ESG media within our indexes and within our scoring system outperforms lower scoring ESG media, and across a whole range of different metrics. So it's true in kind of performance metrics like cost per click. We see higher scoring media being much more efficient in terms of driving efficient clicks than lower scoring. We see the same thing in cost per completed view. We see the same thing even when you then go through to action and to acquisition. Higher scoring media outperforms lower scoring media. And interestingly, there's also a really strong overlap with other things that you might not necessarily think, because what's the real world relationship? Well, we see that attention scores are much higher on higher scoring media as well. And actually in the last panel, people alluded to some of the reasons for that in terms of reduced ad clutter, better editorial environments, all those types of things. But while the data set is smaller, we're also even seeing it around brand lift metrics. So we're seeing some really interesting stuff start to emerge as we work with new partners and new brands that, again, high scoring media drives better results through a brand lift lens than lower scoring media. So I think this is all really exciting. This is, for me, the reason to be optimistic, because if the primary thing holding us back is a perception that performance is harmed, well, we can actually combat that because we have the data to combat it. But it also needs to be really, really easy for brands to use this stuff. And the theme of today is around action. So I'm really, really pleased that we are announcing today our new partnership with Equativ and with Sharethrough to make our data available into their Maestro platform. So if you are a brand, and specifically around inclusivity, so if you are a brand who wants to increase investments into diverse-owned media, for example, you can now do that really simply through your Buy with Equativ. Similarly, if you want to increase your investments into content that serves the needs of diverse groups, you can do that really simply through Equativ. And also, every single person, every single customer using Equativ as part of their media plan can now take advantage of our campaign intelligence services, which essentially is able to measure and map pretty much any ESG metric that you can think of back onto that advertising campaign. So I think what's interesting today for me, listening to it all, and by the way, 7 hours waiting to come up and present. I've just been in the corner rocking for about the last 4 of them, so thank you for sticking around. I was like, is it better if they all leave or not? I don't even know anymore. But so thank you. Oh, I'm so tired. But I think one of the themes of today has been optimism, and it has been, how do you reframe the narrative to become more optimistic? And I think the thing that makes me really optimistic, despite my slightly gloomy opening in terms of the state, the progress we've made, is even though I genuinely believe there's a lot more of this road ahead of us than behind us, I think that the tools now exist from us, but also from a lot of other businesses that help marketing and media to take a proper seat at the table within ESG conversations within brands, and also prove out that it can deliver genuine value back to the bottom line. I think I was within 15 minutes. If I wasn't, I apologize. And I think you're almost free. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Guy. That was a perfect ending here. As we've kind of wrap up the day, we've been talking about this throughout the day of purpose with profit. And I think over and over again today, that conversation has come up around how being more purposeful in our advertising, especially from a sustainability perspective, leads to better performance. At the beginning, if you missed the opening remarks, we talked about how, on the top right there, how advertising, we have the ability to impact beyond just our advertising industry, our impact on brands, and our impact on culture. And I think that's a theme that's happened throughout the day today, and hopefully you've left with some tangible things to bring back to your organization, to bring back to how you communicate, how we can shift the narrative around climate and the different types of words we use, how to remove more of the doomsday narrative and more of a positive attitude. I also want to share just really quickly some of the themes that we saw from the workshop that you all did at your tables. Thanks so much for filling those out. A few, I think, 3 major themes we saw through all of them. There was a lot of great ideas in there. I think one is around how do we hold ourselves, whether we're an agency, an ad tech company, anyone in the industry, hold ourselves more accountable for measurement and optimization and prioritizing relationships with more sustainable partners. I think that came up even during the AI right now. I think that's our next big thing to tackle, is how do we put more pressure on AI and kind of anyone using these data servers to be more thoughtful in the energy that they use, especially from a renewable perspective. Just generally more education needed in the performance benefits of sustainable advertising. I think a lot of us in the advertising industry understand this now, and we need to extend that education to brands and also help them understand how do we measure this and make the best of our emissions. And then just generally improving efficiency. There's a lot of discussion today around how we improve efficiency in different ways in solutions like SPO and repurposing creatives. And I love seeing green PMPs as just a standalone answer like 10 times in those workshops you did. So some of the messages coming through. So thank you both for that and providing some of these, contributing some of those answers and working together on those. I also want to give just a huge thank you to the entire Sharethrough and Equativ team. This has been a huge labor of love for months and months of planning. She hates to be called out, but Vanessa in the back there was a huge part of she hates this, of helping pull this all together and keep this day organized and almost pretty much on time. We're like 6 minutes over, which is insane. And even our CMO, Ben Skenazy, who's actually waiting on a baby any minute or any day. So he couldn't make it, but he was hugely involved in this day. And there's so much happening behind the scenes here to make this day possible. And we just couldn't be more thankful to all of you for showing up, for participating, for showing an interest in this, because sustainability can't be just one of those advertising buzzwords that sometimes come and go like the wind. This needs to be long-lasting because we have a long way to go to solve the kind of climate problems in our world. So we hope to continue doing this day. I think we've been sweating it out for months. Like, are people actually going to show up again this year? We go through that every year, and you all showed up, and you're all still here at 4 o'clock, and you want me to stop talking. So thank you so much for everyone for attending, and we really appreciate it.